Story 1. Hung himself. He was the best history and government teacher I have ever had. Unfortunately, he was a wild alcoholic, and I guess when he was forced to retire, he just didn't have anything to hold him to this earth. Rest in peace, Mr. McDonald. Story 2. He hit a moose. It fell onto the hood of his car, crushing him against the steering wheel. Apparently, he was able to say goodbye to his family, but once they removed the debris and moose, he bled out. He was headed to a late basketball game to support his students. He did not have any children personally on the team. He just felt the need to support them. He was like that. Story 3. One of my college professors passed away due to brain cancer. He was a really nice person. He would let you take as much time as you needed for your tests, even if it meant he had to stay an hour late. He wouldn't rush anyone or object to them taking the extra time. He would just sit and patiently wait for everyone to finish. Story 4. Our ancient Greek teacher was found dead of starvation in his apartment. Apparently, a male prostitute he had hired tied him up, stole his credit card, drained his accounts, and left him to die. Story 5. Years after I graduated, a former middle school teacher and her friend were murdered during a robbery. They were tied up and each shot in the head. She was a good soul who did not deserve that horrific fate. Story 6. My high school chemistry teacher was at the board explaining molecular bonds. Mid-sentence, she suddenly collapsed. No one knew what to do. Medics explained to our class that she died of a brain aneurysm almost immediately, and there was nothing anyone could have done to save her. To this day, it still causes shivers down my spine thinking about it. Story 7. Her husband bludgeoned her to death with a hammer before taking his own life. I was in 10th grade biology when I found out. Absolutely horrifying. Story 8. My science teacher lived across the street from our high school and went home at lunchtime. Her husband murdered her, then doused himself with gasoline and set the house on fire. We were waiting in her class for her in our small town. Story 9. We had a 4th grade teacher who was very cheerful and unexpectedly took her own life by starting her car in a closed garage. It was later revealed she was about to be divorced. I was in the other 4th grade class at my school at the time, and I remember the children being lined up, waiting for the teacher to unlock her classroom and lead them inside, but she never appeared. Story 10. Depressed, drank at school daily, fired for allegedly groping students, got drunk, drove on the wrong side of the highway, and crashed head-on into another vehicle. The other person survived. Story 11. A 5th grade teacher was manually closing her garage door, lost her footing, and the garage door fell on her neck, breaking it. Story 12. I learned this 8 years after I graduated. I loved my chemistry teacher. He was a great person. He was diagnosed with cancer, though I am not sure when, but I heard it was stage 3 or 4 from another teacher. He died when he fell off a ladder while doing some work on his roof. He was quite old at that time and not very fit. I am sure the cancer did not help. Ironically, I found out about his condition when I went to do my teaching placement at my high school. It was because of him that I wanted to become a chemistry teacher. Story 13. There was a 6th grade class teacher. She sent her class boys to steal benches from our class and put them in theirs. We were in 8th grade. Our class boys fought with her and our class teacher. After a month, we got the news that the teacher committed suicide. When I came to school, everyone was shocked. I knew a teacher had died but didn't know who it was. My friends said it was the teacher we fought with. It messed up my mind. She committed suicide because of abuse from her husband. There were rumors that the husband killed her and staged the suicide by hanging her. She had 2 little kids in our school. The whole day was heartbreaking. We felt very sorry for the teacher and her children. Story 14. The man died next to me. He was the principal of the school. I greeted him and continued walking with him while we had a short talk. Suddenly, he fainted and fell face down. I got scared and turned him around, thinking he had fainted. Because of the noise, a teacher came and pulled me away. They sent me to my classroom, and throughout the school day, no one was allowed to leave the classrooms, and no classes were held. At dismissal time, a teacher told us that the principal had died. They never told me the cause of his death. Story 15. He was in a motorcycle accident about a year before he passed away. He was my personal tutor and would come to school wearing a bandana over his head, I guess to cover a scar. A year later, as a dance teacher at my school, he was showing some students a dance he had been working on when he had a sudden aneurysm and died in class. It was a really difficult time because he was an incredible person with a great sense of humor. The school created a memorial garden in his honor. Story 16. High school math teacher. He was a short, unassuming, balding man with a calm demeanor who never raised his voice at anybody. He also always took the ninth grade behind in math class, which was a strange combination of struggling students, dyslexics, burnouts, and wannabe hoodlums. Real hoodlums would just cut class. I was behind in math because I had transferred from Boulder, Colorado to Utica 2 years earlier, where math was taught completely differently, at a much more basic level, and by teachers not trained in math. The culture shock of moving from a big university town to a worn-down post-industrial city was traumatic, and I started to become a problem child. Then, 2 years later, we moved to a suburb of Rochester, and I was well behind my peers in math instruction, especially in my ability to show my work. I would often get the right answer but couldn't explain my reasoning. At first, this class did not seem to be any help. Kids called the teacher obscene names, threw spitballs whenever he turned around to the board, and once I even got robbed of my lunch money in class. Eventually, I went to the teacher and asked for help, and he did. I learned more from those free tutoring sessions than I could in class amid the chaos. I quickly became the top performer, and thankfully, he never made that known. As the year continued, he told the disruptive students to sit in the back and just not make noise or smoke. Every major infraction resulted in a visit to the principal and expulsion from the class, so after a month, things quieted down and some of us actually started learning. He broke us into smaller groups, helping the slower students himself, while a couple of us helped those who were actually able and willing to pass despite appearances. Some people surprised me. One burnout had a horrible home life but was actually smart, and we became friends. Another was from an immigrant family, and his English proficiency was slowly improving. In the end, I passed and got back on track by taking collegiate ninth grade math in summer school. Today, I am a mechanical engineer, and I owe it all to Mr. Now the story of his death. Rumor had it that he had a heart attack a few years earlier. From the time I knew him, he was, despite his meek appearance, quite a regular jogger and exercise practitioner. You would often see him jogging around the track after school, not fast but steady, and with more endurance than I had as a 14-year-old at the time. The year after I had his class, he died of a massive heart attack after one of his runs, while showering. Any stories about how he was found were unsubstantiated, but his funeral and viewing brought out an unimaginable number of current students and faculty. I believe he was only in his early 50s, which means about a decade worth of students never got a chance to learn from him. He got me back on track in academics, but I truly believe he saved a few people from personal ruin. For what it is worth, he died about 48 years ago. Story 17. I was in an all-boys Catholic high school in Brooklyn when my English teacher passed away. We all knew he was a closeted gay man. He died of acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, but the school insisted it was skin cancer. The school refused to even say the word acquired immunodeficiency syndrome back in 1985. Story 18. I had a teacher in high school who almost died. She was one of the band directors. She was 32 at the time and caught chicken pox from one of her children. She developed viral meningitis and was hospitalized for almost 3 weeks. They told us we should not expect her back, so we were all thrilled when she returned to school. Story 19. My high school English teacher died 2 years into my time with him. He was also my father's English teacher. A gentleman. Nobody remembers his name, as he was universally known to my father and me as Andy, for reasons lost to time, even in my dad's time. Rest in peace, Andy, still loving the onomatopoeias. Story 20. I had a coworker pass away in her classroom after school hours. She had a heart episode and collapsed. The custodian found her hours later. Story 21. My child's former 4th grade teacher was stabbed to death while jogging in a nearby forest last year. There is still no news about who did it and why. She was a young woman in her 30s with 2 young children. We are still in shock. Story 22. She was abducted by an abusive ex who decapitated her on the side of the highway. I remember hearing about it in class, so it must have been on a school day. Story 23. In 7th grade, I had a theater teacher who everyone knew had diabetes. The following year, I heard that he died from complications related to his diabetes, possibly a dangerously low blood sugar. In high school, the water polo coach had a heart attack and died. I knew who he was but never had him as a coach or teacher. To make matters worse, his son went to the school, and everyone was always talking to him and asking about it. It was very sad. Story 24. Everyone's favorite substitute teacher passed away from choking on a chicken bone while eating dinner with her family. To this day, I feel paranoid about my own family eating chicken with bones in it. Story 25. A man in his 50s, an art teacher, was murdered in his home. It was rumored for years that he was having affairs with his high school students. People believed that an angry father confronted him for having relations with his underage daughter. The killer was never caught. Story 26. He came off his motorcycle on the way to school. A few of the school buses drove past the scene of the crash. So many of the children saw his mangled body. It was pretty horrible. I think he was only in his 20s. Story 27. My kindergarten teacher died the year after I was in her class. She was supposed to meet a friend but had a heart attack in her car. She died and was found the next day by apartment security. Rest in peace, Miss Crocall. You were very sweet, and I still remember you. Story 28. It was in law school. My Russian business law teacher went missing in action after a few weeks. It turned out he had been smuggling drugs as a side job. He overdosed in the lavatory on a flight from Amsterdam back to Michigan because condoms full of cocaine ruptured in his stomach. The class was canceled. Story 29. He went missing, and they found his van at a local park. All summer long, on my way to work, I would drive down the interstate and smell something dead. I thought it was just a deer, but come wintertime, they found his remains in the same spot I had been smelling, off the side a little up an embankment. No one knows how he got there. It's not like he could have just walked there, and he was a very large man. No one could have dragged him there. It was a strange situation. Story 30. Heart attack in 3rd grade in 1961 when she was 65 years old. She was standing at the board demonstrating how to prove an arithmetic problem one moment and was face down on the floor the next. The children rushed out of the classroom screaming in a stampede. I rolled her over and tried to check her pulse as seen on television, but I could not find any. Story 31. When I was in 3rd grade, my 1st grade teacher died in a house fire. Her body was found hugging her 2 children. It was heartbreaking. I am tearing up thinking about it now, 40 years later. Story 32. He failed one student, and the family got angry at him. They shot him while he was jogging, but it was actually his brother who looked like him. He died of a heart attack after learning that his brother had died. Story 33. A special education student thought it would be funny to hit the math teacher. She broke the teacher's neck. The teacher ended up quitting because the pain never improved. A few years later, she died by suicide. This happened because the special education student believed her friends would find it funny to hit the teacher. Story 34. Committed suicide with a month left in the school year. He was always the funny teacher too, very Robin Williams-like. Depression can really affect the people you least expect. Story 35. She fell and broke her hip. Doctors discovered she had a rare blood disorder, so the broken hip was a blessing in disguise because they could start treatment. Then she suddenly died and the whole process took a week. The truth came out. She was an active alcoholic and had end-stage liver disease. Story 36. My former high school anatomy teacher died in a single-car accident about 2 years after I graduated. I was at college when my mom told me the news. He was one of my favorite teachers of all time. Kind, personable, and chill. I remember walking to class in college one day when he happened to be a chaperone for a group of kids from my old high school touring my college. As I was walking, I heard someone screaming my name. I turned around to see him hanging out of a school bus window, waving at me. An amazing man who was taken way too soon. Story 37. Our third-grade teacher, Mrs. Powell, was assaulted and murdered by a former police officer named David Middleton. Her remains were found in a dumpster, which shocked our entire valley. We took the whole week off, and students began walking to school together in larger groups. It was a random attack as he was working as a cable technician at the time. He killed one more girl before he was caught. If I remember correctly, he was apprehended after using one of her credit cards. Authorities then located his storage unit, which indicated he planned to kill and assault more victims. This occurred in 1995. Story 38. Posted this somewhere else a while back. Our high school chemistry teacher was losing weight, and we joked that he had acquired immune deficiency syndrome. He did, and he died a few years later. Very sad because he was an incredible teacher. This was 1985, before we really understood what it was. Story 39. The marching band won state for several years in a row and was invited to participate in the Rose Bowl parade. He had a heart attack in the airport while the entire band was boarding the planes. Family and friends managed to keep his death from the band until after the parade. Story 40. Murdered by 3 students. It only made local newspapers with limited details about why they killed her. They were sent to the juvenile detention center for a minimum of 2 months and a maximum of 3 years. I never had her as a teacher, but I recognized her from a few meetings in the ceremony hall and from seeing her interact with a few students between classes. Rumors circulated that the boys were using drugs and alcohol in the evenings. They recognized her on the street, followed her, and killed her as she approached her parked car. It is hard to confirm this as it was not officially reported. Story 41. Pancreatic cancer. He died on Christmas and was a well-loved teacher and volleyball coach. The volleyball coach at that school still carries on some of his traditions and created her own tradition for bus rides. He was great. Story 42. The wife opened the basement door to call for him when he was at the top step. It caused him to fall, and his head slammed into the brick wall at the bottom. Story 43. An elementary school orchestra teacher was kidnapped and murdered by a serial killer in my town. He was caught, and this happened in the 1980s. Story 44. Grade school. Her husband took his own life by carbon monoxide poisoning in the car in the garage. However, the fumes spread to the rest of the house and also affected Mrs. G and the dog. Story 45. A cross-country coach and history teacher was accused by a former student of rape while she was a student. He was placed on leave pending an investigation. A few days later, he died by suicide at home. People were uncertain how to feel because the accuser was known for creating drama and had previously made false accusations and lies about serious matters. The teacher was known to be disciplined, tough, but fair. Story 46. Cancer is unfortunate. I was extremely upset when it happened because she was one of the nicest teachers I had and one of the very few who respected me as a person. I was hurt that our school kind of just acted like she did not die. That year, when the yearbook came out, there was no memorial page, nothing like that, just her picture. There was no announcement or moment of silence when she first passed. It was pretty careless, in my opinion. Cancer is terrible. Story 47. My junior high school principal went off an overpass in his car and died in a very fiery crash. It was traumatic for most of the students, given our age and the gruesome way he died. Story 48. A teacher was riding her moped along a road that had been cut through a mountain. It is usually dark there at night. Some intoxicated individuals in a Jeep decided it was fun to turn off their headlights and drive erratically on a two-way road. The teacher crashed into them and died instantly. The intoxicated individuals left the scene. Story 49. My nicest high school mathematics teacher accidentally electrocuted himself in his attic while trying to fix a leak during the summer holidays. Story 50. My dad died of heart disease at the age of 51 years old in 1985. He was a high school welding teacher. I did not go to his high school, but the students were really affected by his death. Story 51. One of the best teachers and principals I knew was murdered by his daughter's ex-boyfriend, who was stalking her after she broke up with him. The ex-boyfriend stabbed him in the heart. Mr. Donahue was his name. He was a wonderful person and teacher. Story 52. Mowing his lawn during summer break, he disturbed a ground nest of bees or wasps, which stung him to death. He was well liked. Story 53. The music teacher had a medical episode and crashed his car. There was a rumor that it may have been suicide. Story 54. Not exactly a teacher, but her position is irrelevant. Her husband supposedly fell terminally ill, and she could not bear the weight of taking care of her daughters alone, so she decided to hang herself. I remember the younger kids being completely traumatized when the school made an official statement. Story 55. Car accident. Was hit by a driver driving under the influence. He and his father, who was in the car with him, both passed away. They left behind his mother. It was a few years after my time, but I lived in a small town, so news traveled fast. He was an algebra teacher and pretty young. He would always bring in Dance Revolution on half-days and would outperform all of us at it. I struggled badly with math, and I will always remember the time I turned in a blank test with nothing written on it except that I did not understand the material and I would accept a bad grade without complaint. He saw me after class and he was very kind to me. He deserved better. Story 56. Mr. Pope passed away from cancer in his 60s, which is not novel or uniquely tragic. However, he was an incredible man who used one of his class periods each year to vulnerably share a deeply personal story of racism and lynching in the United States South that he experienced in his youth. He was also an original Chippendale dance group member and was detained by the Federal Bureau of Investigation for writing a critical letter to President Richard Nixon on a roll of toilet paper. He invented his own symbolic math language and loved Bob Marley. I was really into making compact disc mixes in high school and made him one. He came back the next class period with a note on what he thought about each song. He saw each student for what they truly could be, and I regret to this day that I never got to share what he meant to me. Story 57. One person was hit by an elderly lady driving while he was jogging, and the woman ran a red light. Another person died in her sleep of a heart attack, and another had cancer and died on the day of graduation. Story 58. A random shooting occurred. He was in his car, and the attacker shot him for no known reason. We were all devastated. He was the beloved art teacher at our high school. Story 59. A few years after I graduated, 2 teachers were murdered by someone they stopped to help on the side of the road. Story 60. In the early days of the internet, my 9th grade Spanish teacher got into online dating. She met a man who killed her and left her in a car in the woods. Story 61. I had a high school health teacher in the 1970s who we thought was just an old creeper, but I now realize he was a predator. After his death, I found out that his wife and 8 children lived in poverty in an isolated house out in the country while he was roaming around town. He died in his Firebird racing a train to a crossing. He lost. His family experienced improved living and overall economic conditions as a result of his death. Story 62. She became an alcoholic. She went fishing with her husband. While he went to get some items from the store, she became so intoxicated that she could not get out of the knee-deep water she had fallen into and drowned. Story 63. Not my school, but the one up the road. A teacher drove into the school car park early in the morning and set himself on fire. Story 64. He killed himself because he did not agree with the principal and believed that everyone in the school was against him. He made a 3-hour-long YouTube video explaining why he was killing himself and said whose fault it was. He also went through a lot in his personal life, including a divorce. Story 65. Can't believe you brought this up. I'm old school Generation X. My high school art teacher, who was the coolest hippie ever, was murdered by his wife, who suffered from a mental illness. We just came to school one day and bam, announcement over the intercom. It broke my heart. He taught me about certain Beatles album conspiracies and allowed us to fire pipes and bongs in the pottery kiln. He influenced us artistically, gave us life lessons, and imparted wisdom. I still miss him. Story 66. Picked him up at work after he aspirated from being very intoxicated. He was in bad shape when we got him in the ambulance. He died a few days later in the hospital. I connected some dots about how he acted as a teacher and wondered if he was ever intoxicated while teaching. Story 67. An English teacher died suddenly of a heart attack in class. The room was dark because he was showing a film strip. The students became concerned when he did not advance it after the beep. Story 68. Shortly after I graduated, the beloved English teacher died of ovarian cancer. From diagnosis to death was less than 3 months. They caught it at her annual checkup. Story 69. On the highway with her husband, the car went into the ditch, and the engine went through the car. It was a long time ago before cars were safer. She was amazing. The last time I saw her, I threw up at her feet. Story 70. Suicide. It was the mid-1990s. He was outed as being gay by some concerned parents and poisoned himself in his car. The teacher was actually an excellent educator, and the concerned parents left town shortly after because everyone blamed them for his death. Story 71. Heart attack. I always thought he was a grumpy old man, but as a young adult in my work circles, I ended up at his funeral. There I learned that he was a truly lovely man who dedicated his whole life to others. Story 72. Technically a school counselor. But over the summer, his adrenal gland went haywire and put him in a constant fight or flight mode for several months. He couldn't handle it and went to his family's camping ground and ended his life. Story 73. A teacher was having an affair with another teacher from my school. Both were married. It was during summer break, and they lied to their significant others about going on a trip for a school-related training session. Instead, they planned a romantic getaway at a lake. While there, they rented jet skis and were speeding along the lake when she somehow fell off hers. He was too close behind and ran right over her, breaking her neck and killing her. Story 74. Heart attack while teaching high school physics. Writing a problem on the board, he grabbed his chest, fell down, and was dead before the school nurse arrived. Story 75. The headmaster of my primary school died suddenly from a heart attack in a classroom full of first-year students aged 5 to 6 years. Story 76. His love for a student he coached in sports was revealed when he declared it. The boy was freaked out and told another teacher. At the boarding school, the teacher was fired. He lived on campus, went home, and killed himself. Despite his other failings and fate, he was an excellent biology teacher, one of the best I ever had. Story 77. This is very tame compared to most of the submissions here. During my senior year of high school, a teacher from my school died. She never taught me, but the school had 500 students, so everybody knew everybody. She was also the wife of a famous marine biologist. She died suddenly of a heart attack. It did not happen on campus or during school hours. I found out when I came to school one morning. I saw black ribbons. 2 of my friends were standing at the entrance as if waiting to tell me what was going on. They quickly told me. Tame, but still sad, especially for the students she was currently teaching. Story 78. Crashed piloting a vintage airplane. His passenger died with him. He was my high school French teacher, retired by that time. He died doing what he loved, I suppose. Story 79. This happened just a few weeks ago. My old English teacher was killed, run over by an excavator machine that was operating illegally in the morning on a public beach in Italy. It was absolutely tragic. She died in front of a lot of people. She was one of the sweetest teachers I remember. She was 66 years old. Story 80. Thyroid cancer. She was the best English teacher I had. I became a voracious reader because of her. Rest in peace, Ms. Judy Enoch. Story 81. A high school football coach died of coronavirus disease 2019. He never got vaccinated and was a staunch conservative. He thought it was all nonsense and continued to attend practices, telling the kids not to wear masks. He was also diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, so everyone who liked him blamed the cancer and said he couldn't get the vaccine, but he died of coronavirus disease 2019. I already knew he could get the vaccine because my coworker, who was battling stage 4 pancreatic cancer, passed away a year later, received the shots. The news was also conservative and did not disclose his death as coronavirus disease 2019 related, stating instead that he died of natural causes at 53. This was all in 2021. Story 82. Rumors were circulating that he was accused of something inappropriate on Friday. He drove his car into the median and died on Monday. Whatever it was never became public. Story 83. It was not a teacher. It was the cafeteria lady at the high school. We had a horrible tornado season, and one tornado devastated the city. She lived in a trailer park, and the tornado tore the trailer park apart, flipping and tossing the trailers like Lego blocks. Apparently, she was inside hers and, well, story 84. Turns out she didn't. Ms. Unusual Name taught English in my first year of high school. She was very obese, often eating a Mars bar in class and took regular breaks to go smoke at the nearest fire exit. Halfway through the year, she vanished and we got a replacement. We never saw her again. Fast forward many years. I'm now in my final year of university and talking to someone from a different school. For whatever reason, the name of Ms. Unusual Name came up. Turns out she had a heart attack, spent a lot of time recovering, turned her life around, lost all her weight until she was in excellent shape and started teaching at a different school. Wild. Story 85. He was our digital arts and design teacher. His wife was a palliative care patient after she suffered a stroke when he was away. They had argued before and he drove angry. As far as I know, he never forgave himself. When he disappeared for a while, we naturally assumed she had passed away. Turned out she had. But that was not the only reason. Shortly after her passing, he felt sick and developed a severe headache. Doctors found he had a metastatic late-stage brain tumor. His health rapidly declined, and he died within weeks after the diagnosis, following his beloved wife. He was 54 years old. We were truly shocked. He was a lovely person and a teacher from the bottom of his heart. Always kind, always smiling, and never hesitant to explain a thing even for the fifth time. His theoretical lessons were complex, but he was a genius. He let some of our girls put flashy makeup on him once to impress his wife later that day. She loved it, apparently. He always wore yellow, so eventually, we made yellow bracelets for everyone to mourn the loss of a great teacher. This was 10 years ago, but this story has never left my mind. Rest peacefully, Mr. N. Story 86. He was borderline obese. I think a few years after I graduated, I heard that he passed away from heart failure or something similar. Story 87, 11th grade mathematics teacher, back in the early 2010s. Passed away due to a car accident on a highway during her Easter holidays. The entire school went to pay her respects. I was deeply saddened because she was a very good teacher and was kind-hearted to everyone. Most of her lessons were done in PowerPoint, which were really nice. Story 88. 1. She went on vacation with her husband during a break and had a pulmonary embolism. Thinking back, she was probably quite young. He passed away from natural causes over a weekend. His daughter had not heard from him and found him in his bed when she went to check on him. He was older, retired military, and had tattoos that fascinated us all. Story 89. A substitute teacher was shot and killed by a 9th grade student who was failing the class. The student intended to target the regular teacher, but she was absent that day. Story 90. He was a Catholic high school teacher, likely in his late 50s, and assistant soccer coach. He was stabbed in his home by a prostitute when he refused to pay more than the 2-for-1 offer agreed upon earlier. Story 91. The only time I dealt with a deceased teacher was back in college when one of my professors died. I did online college and started in 2017, well before the pandemic. I remember the school emailed everyone in the class, though I cannot recall which class it was. It was not too tragic, but I believe she passed in her sleep. She was not very old, but it was strange knowing that a new teacher would eventually take over. That is the only time I encountered this situation. Story 92. Sudden cardiac arrest at home. He did not show up the next day, and since it was extremely out of character, some teachers went to check on him. They found him sitting in his favorite chair with a smile on his face while A Bug's Life was playing on television. Story 93. When I was in grade 11 in 1998, my grade school English teacher was shot and killed in her home along with her husband by their son. Apparently, The son had planned to kill his family months prior to the actual act. He mentioned to his friends that it was for insurance money, but no one knows for sure. He was also planning to kill his younger sister, but she was not home when the murders began. I knew her. We were on the same track and field team, but I did not know her well. Paul was at a party, left to go home and shoot his family after a fight with them, then showered and locked the house before returning to the party. He confessed to his friends what he had done. Paul is still serving a life sentence, and his sister is alive and well. That is all I know. Story 94. A group of girls came forward saying he had assaulted them. He swam out into the Gulf of Mexico until he became tired and drowned. They found him washed up on the beach. He could not face his family and community. Story 95. He forced himself onto a male student whom he kept after school for detention. The student had the strength to go home and tell his parents what happened, despite the threats, and they pressed charges. The man killed himself the night before the court date. He did not do it early enough to prevent the student from having to face him. He left it as late as possible to avoid facing the consequences of his actions. Story 96. Most likely had a heart attack while driving, drove through a barrier of a tall bridge over a railroad, and plunged to his death. His mother had to substitute for his class the next day. Story 97. At my high school, one of my teachers was revealed to be a pedophile. He was abusing one of the students he was tutoring. He was good-looking and well-liked by students and faculty. When the abused student finally went to the authorities, they launched an investigation, and the teacher was suspended pending the results. The very next day, he committed suicide. I do not remember if he hanged or shot himself. Once he did that, all charges stopped, but the investigation continued to try to identify everyone he abused. The student who came forward moved to another state. No one at my school heard another word from him. Story 98. I am seeing all these stories, and mine just died of cancer 7 years after I graduated from grade school and 7 years after she retired. Still, I somehow have nightmares of being in her class. Story 99. My former teacher, who is retired, was stabbed to death by her son. He was suffering from schizophrenia and believed she was a spy from East Germany. Story 100. He and his new wife were shot on New Year's Eve by his new wife's ex. This is pretty uncommon in Germany. There was also a 4-year-old child in the house who was left alive but was alone with the deceased for nearly 2 days until the neighbors noticed the open door. He was actually a very good biology teacher. His sons were close friends of my sister. I don't know, but one day in 7th grade, he made paper with us. Someone mixed the paper sludge with his drill and a mixer attachment in a bucket, and some splashed everywhere. I tried to shield my hands, which were quite close to the drill, so he pulled my hands back and made a no-no gesture with his finger. I still remember this vividly. His clothes, beard, glasses, and everything else. Story 101. Elementary school, 3rd grade. She fell walking her dogs at the beach cliffs. The unfortunate thing is that maybe a year before this, she fell off a cliff walking her dogs and was out for a while too. We were so surprised that it happened again, and she passed away this time. Story 102. She was fired for allowing the cheerleaders to party at her house and for drinking while at work. She became intoxicated and crashed her car. Story 103. My 7th grade English teacher died in a car accident. I remember people talking about her and things she said. One of the things was that her favorite song was I Love This Bar by Toby Keith, followed by her singing the song in its entirety. Story 104. My 8th grade algebra teacher woke up one morning not feeling well. She asked her fiancé to call the school to let them know she could not come in, and then she collapsed. We found out she was hospitalized, and we were all very confused and worried. She was young, only 26, and had appeared to be perfectly healthy. We learned the next day that she had died, and the doctors had absolutely no idea what caused it. It was not an aneurysm, heart attack, or infection, just no explanation. A few years ago, her father was interviewed by our village's local newspaper. He said the greatest tragedy of his life was losing his daughter and not even knowing how or why she died so young. It was heartbreaking. Story 105. The band teacher died from lung cancer. A student had also died months earlier from cancer. It was a very sad year. Story 106. He was a millionaire who used to work for International Business Machines Corporation. He pioneered some technology for them back in the day. Later, he became a math teacher in a low-income school in Texas with difficult students. He was extremely strict but also cared deeply for his students and their learning. He passed away from cancer after we graduated. It was a relatively small school of about 1,200 students, and he taught most of the advanced courses, so I was lucky to have him several times. He really lightened up during our senior year, which was an interesting change compared to the person we were used to for the most part. He passed away a year or two later. Rest in peace, Mr. Tyre. You are one of several teachers who influenced me to become a teacher myself. Thank you for your service. I will never forget you. Story 107. They said he resisted arrest and obstructed justice. Somehow, they recovered what was deleted from his hard drive, and the story went dark until his funeral. Story 108. My 8th grade science teacher was a great and engaging person. He was very short and thin, and on the first day he told us it was because he had a 3-chamber heart. The 2 lower chambers did not have a wall between them, so the oxygenated blood coming from the lungs mixed with the deoxygenated blood from the body. Therefore, the blood that went out to his body had only about 3/5 of the oxygen it should have carried. He was in his 30s then and told us that when he was born in the late 1940s to early 1950s, he was not expected to live past age 2. He kept defying the odds throughout childhood and adulthood. He even got married but did not have any children. His heart finally gave out a few years later when I was a senior. Peace to you, Mr. Rowe. Story 109. He jumped off the brand new overpass onto the highway below in the middle of the night. He was the school counselor. Story 110. A teacher almost died the year before my freshman year. She had a severe peanut allergy, to the point where she would have an attack even if she did not eat or touch peanuts, just having them in the room. She told every student about this on the first day of school and said no peanut products were allowed in her classroom for any reason. She even had a sign outside the door during all 4 years she was there. However, a student did not believe her and decided to open a Reese's in class. She went into anaphylactic shock before he could eat it. Students panicked but got a teacher. She was taken to the hospital and was in a coma for a while. The student admitted his guilt to a friend, but the friend reported him to the office. He was expelled from the entire school district, and his parents had to send him to a completely different school far away from them. They would have pressed charges if she had not survived. Story 111. My former history teacher had a heart attack while riding his bicycle downhill and subsequently crashed into the back of a van. This occurred 5 years after I graduated. I attended his funeral because he was a very kind teacher who was loved by his students and colleagues. Story 112. A drunk driver caused an accident 2 weeks into the summer. He was on vacation with his family when the driver crossed the median and hit their car head-on. My teacher died. His wife was in the hospital for almost a month, and both the drunk driver and my teacher's son were able to walk away from the collision. Story 113. When I was in high school, my kindergarten teacher passed away. He was drunk driving his plane and crashed into someone's barn. They have a painting of a man in a little red plane on the side of the building facing the playground now in honor of him. Story 114. One of the more popular football coaches at our high school had an argument with his young adult son. His son became very angry and started hitting him. The coach was a black belt in a martial art. The coach, his wife, and his daughter managed to get into a bedroom and locked the door. The son took an axe, entered the bedroom, and attacked his father. Story 115. One of my professors died of cancer. She was married to another professor who was known as a bit of a tough person. He always had a distant look in his eyes whenever he talked about her from then on. No real outward emotion, but that was almost worse. I hope he is doing well now. Story 116. A building where we stayed during a school trip caught fire while we were sleeping. She was grading my work just a few hours before that, and suddenly she was gone forever. Story 117. Pancreatic cancer 2 months before open enrollment for health insurance. Went 6 months not knowing why he felt bad but came to work and put in the effort. Then came to work for one more month after receiving a diagnosis. Died over summer break. First-year teacher, so broke and could not afford treatment. Story 118. Presumed suicide by pills. Her family did not disclose it to the students, but a teacher revealed it. She was my psychology teacher and was great at her job. She was open about her struggles with depression due to her husband developing Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases at age 39. She had to raise her children while caring for him. She was close to retiring within the next 2 years. She had a granddaughter she loved and seemed to have met a man she was dating, whom she liked and planned to travel with. Occasionally, I wonder why she did it when it seemed she had so much support and things to look forward to. I have always wondered if it was accidental. Story 119. A language teacher at my school went on vacation with her family to a hotel in a mildly exotic location, which was the target of a major terrorist attack. Half the building collapsed with her and her 2 youngest children inside. Her husband and 2 eldest daughters, who were on the other side of the room, survived. The whole family was split in an instant. Story 120. He took his own life after being caught having an affair with an 18-year-old. His wife worked at the same school and apparently remained friends with him until he died. Story 121. My physics teacher argued that they should not increase the speed limit of a road because he demonstrated that even a 10 kilometers per hour increase in speed would result in a disproportionately higher kinetic energy in collisions. They raised the speed limit anyway. He lived on that very road and drove it every day to work and back. He died of a heart attack. You probably thought this story was going to end differently. Did you not? Story 122. My mother's deputy head suddenly died of a heart attack during break time. Some of the boys witnessed it, and the more creative or psychopathic among them began imitating the scene for those who had missed it almost immediately. Some of the parents attempted to sue the school for emotional distress, but the case did not proceed. Story 123. Before I went to high school and was still in elementary school, one of our high school teachers was murdered. He was shot while driving his car. It was a huge event at the time and the mafia was mentioned. Another time, when I was in the 6th grade, one of our teachers died over Christmas break. He went jogging, and they found him dead on the side of the road from a heart attack. I remember how it stuck with me because I was so young. Story 124. I taught for 16 years. During that time, 3 teachers died. One was a woman who had a heart attack. Another was a man who died in a diving accident. The last one took his own life. Story 125. None while I was there. The newsworthy events were the book Fast Times at Ridgemount High was published. The author had attended the school the year before. A teacher was fired for sleeping with a student, and an aide was the centerfold in Playgirl magazine. Also, we removed the class president. Story 126. Killed himself with a gun in a public park bathroom after it was discovered he was sexually abusing a student. Story 127. Shot his wife, then himself. I never had him for class, but he hated Christmas and every year put up a black Christmas tree with bullets as ornaments in the display case outside his classroom. His classroom was the first one I passed entering the school every morning. To get physical education out of the way and take another elective, I had physical education in the mornings before classes generally started, so I arrived before most people, including this teacher. Full of holiday spirit, I kept hanging candy canes on his classroom doorknob as I walked by. This teacher's house was only a few houses down the street from mine. The news of what happened made me reconsider my candy cane antics. It's all fun and games until you provoke someone who wants to take their own life and others. Then it's just fun, I guess, because I think I'd still do it again. Lessons were not learned. Story 128. The golf coach suffered a heart attack in his office and died during lunch. Students found him and thought he was napping at his desk. Story 129. My high school computer science teacher was killed by a person he allegedly hired and then refused to pay. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.